The statement, subsidy is gone, will continue to live for a very long time in the minds of every single Nigerian. Remember that statement? Also remember the declaration of the floating of the naira, the policies. And we've seen massive shifts as well. Also call them the necessary reforms. Others say they've deepened hardship. So where do the facts truly fall economically in Nigeria?
In the President's May 29 statement in commemoration of his second year in office, he acknowledged the hardship Nigerians have had to endure and also noted that the renewed hope policies have helped many out of poverty. Though the World Bank seems to think otherwise, as it even projects that more Nigerians will fall into poverty by 2027. We will be discussing what's working and what's not. We'll also find out what more about the Tinubus administration has for Nigerians for the next 2 years to better the economy. Join us to answer all these critical questions this morning at Breakfast Central and the state of the nation, also with special focus on the economy. It's a special advisor to Mr. President on Economic Affairs in the Office of the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Dr. Tope Fasua. Well, welcome to you. Thanks for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invite. It's good to be here.
Let's start with the economy. Mr. President, in a statement on the 29th of May, said that the worst is over.
Absolutely.
What evidence do you have to back that up, that the worst is over? Because Nigerians on the street are looking at inflation at a high level. It's in double digits, and then you're saying the worst is over. It's kind of hard to reconcile it with the reality on ground, the lived experience of ordinary Nigerians.
I think the issue is that, or the fact is that the kind of reforms that Mr. President embarked upon as at May 29, 2023 to date are such reforms that you can't do them twice. You can only shoot once, and of course, Mr. President shot those bullets at the time that it needed to be done. Right at the point of his being inaugurated, he walked away from the subsidy thing, and what that has done, basically, is to actually clean up that sector. Today we're talking about Dangote Refinery, we're talking about Bua almost coming up, we're talking about Walter Smith in Imo State, we're talking about other refineries in Edo State, in River State, and more initiatives coming up. We're talking about $13.5 billion in new investments, potentially in the oil sector. We're talking about, Nigerian indigenous oil companies taking over some of the multinationals, like Shell, like Mobil and Co. Seplat is now, Mobil is now Seplat. Renaissance has taken over Shell and Co. Nigerians getting involved in that space, and I think that actually really trickles down to the people of this country. So we're talking about new investments in that area. We're talking about new employment. I as an economist, I try to do things differently, and the fact is that in Nigeria, those who get into better fortune hardly speak up because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. So we hear a lot of the issues with people who the policy has affected sometimes negatively, which are many people. For example, the price of fuel went up. Inflation went up to 38%, but now back to 23.7%, with the trajectory that inflation is going to continue to taper down. So we're hoping that inflation going down, of course, directly affects people. It takes people like us who are economists and maybe in the system to be able to describe exactly what the phenomenon that's going on is, So you don't expect the market woman to be able to tell you how that inflation affects them, or how the reduction of inflation this time around affects them. But it's affecting them positively. We hear that the price of rice has gone down from about 110,000 to 58,000, in some places 55,000, as a result of the policies. And so we're hoping that food being the major driver of our inflation in Nigeria, and food prices going down, including vegetable oil, beans, and so on, the staples, this is going to be a good thing for Nigerians. We're already beginning to see that. And the other aspect of the naira. So what the naira floating, quote and unquote, at that time, because I believe we're back to the era of managed floating with central bank intervening sometimes as another player in the market. So central bank has taken on the stance of, look, they can go into the market and buy. They can go into the market and sell money to banks to ensure a certain band is maintained or ensure that there's no major crisis. But we see a floating of the naira swinging from 1,500 to about 1,600 and so on. So, but I think one thing critical, so I can allow you to speak, is that that has happened is that the two major policies has released a whole lot of money to the subnationals. We see states now getting twice what they used to get pre-May 29, 2023 in naira terms. Many of them have been able to double their IGR. We have a lot of naira liquidity to affect the people with. So now it's just
but
the time.
The real value of the naira is not the same.
Absolutely given, but minding that the fact that the naira is our sovereign currency, not the dollar. So there's a lot we can do with the naira. For example, pay people's salaries, and you know, a minimum wage law was reached, whereby right now we're talking about 70,000 minimum wage in Nigeria. Anyone paying less than that for standard employment is not doing well. In fact, this morning I shared something on social media where we heard that a certain filling station pays their people 10,000 naira. Because sometimes these are political issues. The owner of the place may want to make a political statement to say, oh, the president and the economy is really bad. But the reason why inflation got to 34.8% in December was because everybody has added to the prices of their goods. Every invoice is a lot higher, except for businesses that are not viable. I understand sometimes people are in businesses that are unviable. Understood, but for businesses that are still surviving, most people, if not everybody, is charging a whole lot more than they used to charge 2 years ago. And that the first charge for them should be that they should pay their staff better than you can't expect someone to survive on 2 years ago salary, because we know the effect of inflation on some goods. For example, agri sector, the food sector, on some goods, inflation is as high as 200%. It is admitted, we understand that. Minding the fact that when that inflation was really peaking, the truth was that a lot of people were adding to their goods just on a whim. They were adding prices just on a whim. You wake up, you don't like the face of the president, you add to your prices. And so it was a struggle for us to say, you know, how do we wrestle this inflation, given that the way they came was kind of unorthodox. You know, it's not what you're going to read in a textbook. This is Nigeria. People take decisions for different reasons. Sometimes you get emotional, sometimes for political reasons. Sometimes people increase prices just because they can. Because it was a seller's market. You know, take it or leave it. I'm going to put my price, well, that's what I want to sell. If you like, buy. If you like, don't buy. I'll keep it, knowing that for a fact that most of the goods that we're talking about are essentials like food, you know, like drinks, things that affect people, even much less for clothes, but for the very basic stuff that people need.
All right. I mean, you've highlighted a number of areas. You've talked about the minimum wage that has been implemented, which is a great idea, or it's a great action by the current administration. Unfortunately, a number of people are yet to see the implement. It has taken much longer than expected for that to be implemented. The Judiciary Union, Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, were meant to go on a strike as a result. Their bodies, organizations, and institutes that still complain about that not being implemented. Away from that as well, if we're looking at inflation, you talked about the current rate being at 23.7%.
Right.
December 2024, we had an all-time high. So it goes up to about 34.8%. So if we're looking at these facts, also SBM Jollof Index, what they do is they analyze how much it will cost to cook a pot of jollof. They said that in 6 months is 19%. I mean, these are just one of the things. Again, you say that the people who are maybe positively impacted by this are not coming out to speak up. But we get to speak with the majority of the masses. And I do not think that, I mean, we've seen a lot of their complaints about not being able to feel the impact of these numbers and the data that you're sharing with us. even in terms of insecurity, we're seeing insecurity being a factor that has affected agriculture, and the impact of being able to, the food basket of the nation has suffered from insecurity in the past few months. So where would you say that there is a disconnect?
Okay, so the point is that we, in matters of macroeconomics, and when the government does this level of reforms, 2 years is not enough time for you to begin to call, and say, is everybody enjoying? Minding the fact, of course, in nowhere in the world does everybody enjoy anyway. Even in some of the bigger countries that we look up to, there are people sleeping on the streets, there are people really, really suffering. Sometimes maybe born out of their own actions or inactions or what have you, but it's the way the world is. It's never been that everybody will enjoy. Sometimes when we say, people say, oh, Nigeria has so many resources, nobody should be hungry in this country. Well, there are no models to show where nobody is enjoying. Even in the Scandinavian countries where they practice social democracy and there's so much. In fact, the Scandinavian country, 35% of workers work for government, are paid every month, whether they like it or not. That creates a flaw for the economy and so on. So 2 years is a time to review what has been done and know whether there are major changes that we need to make. What this has shown is just that from my own perspective, this 2 years' time is a time for us to now say, how is this thing affecting the people? We have done what we need to do. We can see industries repositioning. In fact, one of the accusations I've heard is that, this government has made it such that only the corporate sector is making money. And indeed, yes, the corporate sector is making money. Companies that declared losses at the end of 2022, 2023, some of them are declaring record profits now. From telecoms, you're there, MTN and co complaining. Now they've declared record profit. Banking sector keeps declaring all those kind of profits and so on. And even some of the manufacturing industry like Guinness, like MBL PLC, MB PLC, Nigeria Breweries and co, have declared the record profits in this year. Now, the thing is that, first of all, let them take care of their staff. And that's why some of us are here to say, they can do a whole lot better. And not only them, even some of the SMEs, small and medium scale enterprise, because that's where the real numbers are, not even nano, micro enterprises. We want to sensitize them that, you can't pay your people at the level that you were paying them in 2023. Let's ensure. So that actually out of the hands of the government, the only thing the government can do is to sensitize and to prod them and to do some moral suasion to say, do better by your people. Income levels have to shift outward majorly. Wage levels and so on have to shift outward majorly. So yes, SBM Jollof Index and co. And the only problem I have with that, because and it's also that it depends on which indices they are working with. It depends on the components of their index. So I think that if they did the Jollof Index again, with rice price where it is today, they should declare a deflation in the Jollof Index because it should go down majorly. And indeed, the price of staples are falling. How do we ensure that the fall in those prices, of course, shouldn't continue ad infinitum? We're not looking at creating deflation. What we all want is a disinflation, a reduction in the rate of inflation. And of course, the World Bank did say that they expect us to have an average inflation of 22% by the end of this year, meaning that our target of achieving 15% inflation by December is feasible. We could even do better than that, so that we can average out for the whole year and achieve 22%. So I think that, like Mr. President said, I think the worst is over. We can't deregulate the fuel sector twice. We can't. That's been done, and what that has done is to actually release a lot of money to the state level, because that's where the people live. Mr. President is very big on local government autonomy. That's where the tire hits the tarmac. And I think going forward, I think it's going to be good for most Nigerians.
You've talked about in the past 2 years, it's not enough to have achieved what, is set to be achieved. And you've talked about compared to foreign countries as well. The president has 2 more years to go. In fact, starting from the 29th, he has gone into the 3rd year, whether we like it or not. But is 2 years enough to maximize and reach all of this? Are you certain that 2 years is enough? And in the next 2 years, Nigerians will be able to say yes.
Absolutely.
All what you said, you've been able to achieve. Or is it another case of, just putting it out there that we need 2 more years, but it's starting to look like the attention is now driven towards extending for another 4 years, where mild or subtle campaigns have begun.
Oh, well, the thing is, if we actually bring in the politics side of things, it gets a bit confusing, because already you can see political movements are beginning, and many of them try to...
But isn't that distracting?
Well, not Mr. President, and doesn't distract the economic team. All we can do now is to say, okay, it focuses us better to say, how are our people, the real people of Nigeria, getting the benefit of the reforms? Minding the fact that there are not just only 2 reforms, there's also the tax reform. That's a major reform. Hopefully, we're waiting for the assent of Mr. President after the National Assembly has submitted their harmonized position. And that policy itself is also pro-poor. One of the things you see in the tax policy, at least one of the things I can speak about, is that the federal government used to get 15% of the VAT collections in this country. We're reducing that to 10% and taking that 5% to add to what the local governments get. So the states are now going to get 55% of VAT, the local government will get 35% of VAT, and so on. So I think that it focuses us, because we also don't expect that Nigerians will wait for the whole 2 years, and the elections are taking place somewhere in the middle of that. But I think that what it focuses on is to say, this minimum wage, how is it working? We know that the youth corpers now get 77,000 every month. That's quite a lot of money. It's okay for them. And also recently it was announced that students of technical schools will get 45,000 naira every month. What that is supposed to help with is to divert attention to technical education, to ensure that even children from poor backgrounds can go into technical education knowing that they are cared for. And that is going to be very, very salutary, because like the UK, like Europe, you will find a situation where we begin to place more value on technical education rather than just going to university for the prestige purposes. Lastly, let me say that also one of the key decisions that was taken recently at the Federal Executive Council is the Buy Nigeria policy. And I was just seeing now that I think the World Bank commented on that, and was it the IMF?
The IMF.
The IMF commented on that and said the Buy Nigerian policy is going to be helpful in the achievement of some of our, and of course it's what the whole world is looking at. We're actually in a time of economic nationalism of sort, but every country has to think for itself. And in buying Nigeria, patronizing Nigeria, using Nigerian contractors, placing more value, that helps us to capacitate from the ground up and use our own money to reboot our own economy.
Okay. And the government also has to lead by example.
I'd like us to talk about Buy Nigeria shortly, but I do want us to still come back a little, to touch a little more on, the reforms lifting people out of poverty. I don't know, was it IMF or World Bank? No, it was IMF, but this time the World Bank had said that 30.9% Nigerians live below the international poverty lines. There are also reports that poverty in the rural areas increased to 75.5%. So what are the plans?
I'm not even sure the World Bank has the capacity to measure exactly what's going on. One of our problems in Nigeria is what I would call data sovereignty. I mean, if we wait for the World Bank to come and do our own data and know exactly who's poor in Nigeria and where they're poor, we've already missed it. And we're moving against that to capacitate the National Bureau for Statistics to be able to get those data themselves. Because again, what I realized was even the World Bank, I interact with the World Bank in Nigeria, which the guys who are on ground, sometimes they differ in their position. If you look at the NDP that was presented, the Nigeria Development perspective that was presented by the World Bank in Nigeria, was a lot more positive. They even commended the government for the growth rate. They commended for the growth rate that we had intrinsically the highest growth rate in the last 10 years. As at 2024, 3.4% growth intrinsically. on encumbered growth for the last 10 years. So those guys in Washington saying that more people are going to be poor in Nigeria, I'm not sure they know what they're talking about.
But when they say positive things, the government celebrates.
Well, we look at it. No, we don't just celebrate. We would look at the veracity of the information and see whether it aligns with the current reality of where we are. We're not deceiving ourselves. You know, at the end of the day, we should know more about our country than any international organization. And my own perspective, you know.
So, if you don't believe in the numbers, and you don't think that the World Bank and these
I'm just saying that we can do a better work.
So, how do we get this data here?
Exactly. So let's rely more on the job of the NBS. And National Bureau for Statistics. Let's capacitate that organization more. Give them more better funding. That's my own advocacy.
But the NBS also came out with something that wasn't really appreciated. When they talked about the issues with the economy and how it's affecting Nigerians as well, in one of their reports, I mean, time would fail me if I have to go through all of that.
Well, yeah, but
would you also say that the NBS is equally?
No. Well, anyway, from my perspective, see, an economist, what we do or how we are trained is to interrogate every position, for good or bad. So even if something is looking too good, we check and say, are you sure this is true? And we have to be logical about every scenario. You know, I just believe that more people, if we're moving a whole lot of money to the state government, and I keep giving this example. Just last week, I was in Cross River State in Calabar, and they were graduating about 1,500 people who they had trained in MSME and all of those, and how to run the organization. And 500 of them were retirees and pensioners. And for the first time, I heard them say, you know what, they have to commend their governor, Governor Basio too, who happened not even to be there that day. To commend him for the fact that they were now getting their emoluments on time, their retirement benefits on time. There was a 15-year interregnum where things were really tough for them and so on. Things seem to, and the reason why that's so is because the states have the liquidity to pay those people in naira. Minding also, Benga, that in the year 2024, Nigerian states were able to pay down 32% of their total loans. I think one of the states in the north, is it Kebbi or Zamfara, actually paid down 97% of the loan. Those states paid over 80% of their loans. What that has done is, if you had an organization and all of a sudden you're able to clear your creditors down by 80%, it frees up your balance sheet. Your balance sheet is looking suddenly fantastic with a lot of cash position and very few people chasing you to come and pay their money. What that means is that the states can actually borrow more for developmental projects. In fact, with the amount of naira going to the state times 3 of what they used to get, there's a lot of liquidity for them, and we should be expecting an explosion of local infrastructure, which will be done by mostly Nigerian companies, putting money in the hands of our people, reducing the poverty level, and actually beginning to deliver the expected prosperity to every Nigerian.
All right, let's
I want to take you back to some things you said before my colleague moves on to debt. You emphasized as one of the achievements of this administration, local government autonomy. On paper, fantastic initiative. It frees the local government is closest to the people and it gives them more money. And the fact that the government has saved all this money from the removal of subsidy goes down to the federating units. But implementation, nothing seems to be happening. I mean, the Supreme Court even came out and said, look, the states should enforce local government autonomy, but everybody seems to be refusing Mr. President's order. When are we going to get that implemented? And number two, going back to the jollof index, I mean, if you want to have jollof, you would not eat only rice. You emphasize on the rice. You need tomato.
The rice is a
you need condiments. You need protein.
I know. But the rice, the way indexes work, it depends on where you put most of the percentages, how you spread it. But clearly, because of course this idea of Jollof index, remember we have a Jollof war with Ghana and Senegal, who owns Jollof. Nigeria seems to be the one bullying the whole world.
But you will not eat
Jollof.
only rice.
No, but it's a major. The rice is a major part. And if you look at how the price of rice was able to come down, the government had to say, you know what, let people then import and of course some of the farmers are saying, you guys are squeezing us out. It's no longer profitable. Well, fair enough, but I also saw another tweet by someone who happens to be a farmer up north, and the guy was actually urging his colleagues to hoard the rice paddy. He said, let's go and let's hoard this thing until the prices go up. So there's that intricate competition in any economic environment whereby there are people who want to maximize. The government is there in the middle, caring about the people, thinking, what do we do about the people? There are people who also need to survive. So we're balancing the act between those who need to survive, Nigerians, and those who want to maximize their profits just because we say we're running a free market system. So what do we do? But okay, so the government said, this rice issue, I was thinking at some point, could Nigerians ever have enough of rice? I've seen people, unfortunately that time, during the NSAS time, people who looted several bags of rice, and then they will keep those rice in their house, and then they'll come back and tell you how they are hungry in their family and all of that. I'll be like, will we ever have enough? So this time around, this government has been able to prove that there are things we can do to affect some of those staples that we thought we could never conquer. So the price of rice is being conquered, So what was your second? You mentioned about the local government. So actually there was a point in time, in fact right now, the process is still going on. Of course, before you release money to the local government, so that the system doesn't break down, there has to be signatories to the account. And so the first thing that Mr. President was able to do is ensure that every state in this country has been able to conduct local government elections. Whether they are perfect or not, that's it. But they were able to conduct local government elections. There are local government chairmen in every local government, almost every, if there are one or two that are missing, in this country. And so first of all, you have to get that. They have to sign their mandate in central bank so that when the money is released, we know who's signing out the money and so on. The state governments, of course, being that they understand what's going on, also will not easily release that mandate to the local government. They want to have a say and continue to have a say in what happens. But the political rapprochement will be made when the time comes.
But time is ticking. People's lives are being affected.
No. Yeah. Okay, so what's happening is that the states are still probably administering some of those monies. But like I said, the states are getting so much more, and that money is beginning to seep to the people where it matters. When the local governments come, we'll also see an acceleration of that anti-poverty policy, as it were. We'll see, but that's the first of all is that the operational issues must be dealt with at central bank. Then, secondly, the political rapprochement will be. If the Supreme Court has ordered something, eventually the states will have to comply.
I mean, just as an aside, to further buttress something my colleague had said earlier about the criticism against the NBS, one of them would be the rebasing of the CPI, where they had said that a number of the reductions that were, put forward were not reflective and indicative of what the current market reality is. But I think that would be another conversation.
It's not another conversation. It's a conversation we need to have. So the CPI has been rebased. And essentially, look, the whole idea of rebasing is this. Number one, that understand that, look, you cannot have the same index, the same base for the index over too long a period, because so many things are changing. So part of it is that, like right now, before this MBS used to, in the food basket from which the CPI is pronounced, they used to have about 760 items there, food items and different items, food, electronics, what have you. Now they've increased that to 900 and something, about 950, which is remarkable because the more robust that basket is, the better the numbers you're getting out of it. So we should actually look at what they've done and their methodology, the new methodology. And then there were some international frameworks which they follow. And those international frameworks, they keep on being innovated. So they have actually been able to step up to the latest level of international, frameworks to be able to say this is how they do it elsewhere. We are usually slow. We're even waiting for our GDP rebasing. And no matter what anybody says, let the NBS will do his work. Of course, there are always the critics. There are political critics. There are people that, if the numbers are looking good, they don't want to hear about it. So when the CPI, when the inflation dropped from 34% to 24%, say, oh, this and that, the thing doesn't, then do your own, if you can have the capacity. But remember that, I mean, the MBS is the biggest organization in Nigeria that is capacitated to be able to get something at least close. I'm not saying that their processes are perfect, but at least they're doing their work, and we should allow them to do their work. And we're waiting for the GDP rebasing, because we ought to have rebased more than 5 years ago. Okay, we have to be able to capture the dynamism of this economy, because this is the growing economy is much more dynamic than, I mean, in the US, in the UK, for example, which I'm fairly used to. You know, things will change in a slower fashion because they have achieved so much. They have achieved so much. The number of skyscrapers coming up in Nigeria are a lot more than the skyscrapers coming up in the UK for now. You know, and I measure some of those things. I read them. I know what's going on in those places. So we grow faster. Our real estate is growing faster. Our agri is growing faster. Even our population is growing faster, meaning that our economic activities here are growing faster, or will grow faster than most of those economies that are matured and are plateaued, so to speak.
Real estate is growing faster, but it's really shocking a lot of Nigerians.
Yes, sometimes it's artificial pricing. People, I mean, I see the criticisms on social media. People will say, why are you selling a house for $5 million in Nigeria when, you know, what are you offering?
Yes.
The same money would do a lot more in the US, even in the United States. If you went to places like Houston, you buy houses of $300,000 and so on. You know, so it's also part of it. All of us are economic players. All the opinions will shape how that is going. However, I get your point. I think what your point is that, look, there has to be deliberate action to protect the people who are growing. In the UK, they always talk about getting on the ladder. Someone who has just left university, who has worked for maybe 5 years or so, should begin to think about, oh, can I get a flat somewhere, a small flat? Even you start with we start with a studio flat, you know, a room and parlor. So how many of those units are we having, or people are because in spite of these high prices, if you come to a place like Abuja, more than 200,000 houses, the last time I checked, are vacant. Many of them houses either vacant or abandoned estates because the pricing is too much. The developer went bust or something.
Yeah.
This is we need to tell ourselves that beyond making money, we need to start to plan for our people, our population, the young people as they grow, because the way it happens elsewhere is that the young people get the small houses, then they now look for bigger houses as they get families. As they grow old, they come back to the small houses.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So there has to be a deliberate plan in that respect.
Let's look at the inflation rate. I mean, just this morning, we saw that Nigeria's import bill has risen by 63% in 1 year.
I don't. Where did you get that number from?
That's
my own. My own analysis, you know, I'm compiling that presently, is that import fell about 20% for 2024.
Okay, fine. So we have 63, it fell by
64%, 63% is a low lot of increase. Import bill. So I'd like to know the component of that increase.
Okay, good.
Or maybe they're talking about naira. Okay, now, I think exactly. So the factor is the depreciation of the naira. Okay, so every time when you see such high numbers, usually it's the depreciation of the naira that affects it. That it would have grown much more, exactly. If the import itself in dollar terms hadn't fallen, if import was constant between that last year and the year they're talking about, maybe 2024, okay, if import was constant, then it would have been 100% increase. Okay, but because it wasn't constant, import itself in dollar terms fell, but the naira depreciation affected it and boosted the naira value of import. Then you can land at 64%.
Let's break it down to the average Nigerian who's watching us now. I mean, the association who deals on sales of Tokumbo cars, like we say. I recall 2013, you were able to buy a Corolla for about 1.3, 1.4. And just recently, the association came together and said that they are not selling because of these policies. That same car that was bought for 1.3, 1.4 in 2013, 2014, now goes for 9 million naira. Do you think that it could be as a result of the fact that this administration is doing way too much in trying to see how they can, balance the economy? However, it is impacting heavily on the pockets of the citizens. Don't you think that
so this is, I think
we should be addressing things
the philosophy
one at a time?
No, not at all.
Because there's electricity tariff.
There's oh yes, right, yes.
There's the car issue that people. I mean,
I get your point.
A young man at 22 or 23 cannot buy a car anymore.
I'm not sure in the way our economic history, I didn't buy a car when I was 23. I probably bought my first Tokumbo car when I was like 28 or thereabouts.
But it's not possible anymore today.
Well, it depends on where you're working. I was working in a bank, which you consider as a good job at that time, you know. But let no new graduate think about buying a car. I think that some of it that we're supposed to speak to ourselves about some of these issues. There's absolutely nothing wrong, even in the UK, in the US. Well, in the US, where they have a big transportation problem, you know. So I think the thing is to be like the UK, where they have a working public transport system that doesn't even require you to buy a car very quickly. You know, I think we should do that. No, I think some of the states are trying their best, like Niger State, like of course Lagos State is the standard. Many of them are investing in public transport system now as a way of giving back the subsidy to their people, so that you can actually use those public transport systems and pay next to nothing. The real problem is also that psychologically, are we ready for that? In this Lagos, I don't want to preempt you. I probably say some of us sitting here have not used the blue line before, or even the red line.
I don't believe it doesn't cover the areas I go to.
But then, even for people where they cover the areas where they are, they probably won't be seen. They won't want to be seen in those things. I use it myself. I use sometimes, of course, to move from VI to Mamu to Mile 2. I use the blue line. In Abuja, I use the metro. I've used it at least 4 times to move from central area, which is World Trade Center, to the airport. Hardly would I see any of my colleagues doing that, or any person who's around my age mate or who we have been colleagues sometime in the past. They won't do that. So it's easy for us to complain about this, but the point is, are we also ready? So I think that we should also encourage ourselves in that regard. So the thing is this, that the philosophy is that this administration is trying to reduce import dependency. Okay? We're trying to do that. So the Tokumbo index may not be a good barometer to measure by, because we want us to slow down a little bit on this. But on the other side, we expect that people should now be earning at least twice or thrice what they were earning 2 years ago. Meaning that we're looking at a different reality here. If the government has increased corporate salary from 33,000 to 77,000, that's almost times, that's more than times 2, more than 100%. I probably feel about 130%. The same 130% was achieved for minimum wage from 30,000 to 70,000. So what it's telling us is that organizations should be ready to pay their staff about 100% more than they were earning. And so it changes, it recalibrates everything. You probably would have to wait a little bit longer to put that money together. But also what the government is trying to do is to have a credit system. So unlike here, where you have to look for all of the Tokumbo car money to go and pay someone to be able to buy your car at 9 million naira, the Corolla you mentioned. But the Corolla is also not a very good index, because the Corolla is very popular. It's used for Uber and all of those things. So there's
I could mention many of them.
Okay, I think we need to notice that.
Right.
You know, but instead of that, you know, so you probably wait a little longer to buy that same Corolla now, as it were. But at least we're also encouraging the credit culture, just like it happens abroad, where you don't have to put all that money down. You probably have to give them 10% of the money.
I hope we can start to see situations where they're buying new Prado vehicles for government officials, because if the
I came here in an Uber, so there's always that very interesting thing. Yes, of course, I think that's been a major slowdown of that. You know, for someone like me.
So we're going to see senators.
I heard this chap, I think Bello El-Rufai, the member of House of Representatives, El-Rufai's son, saying I saw something going on social media yesterday, where he was actually saying that, look, all of this budget that's coming, and you know, every year people are buying cars, doing the same thing and all of that, that they should slow them down I'm 110% in support of that. Of course, you know, the problem is that the political system, the executive does not want to muzzle the legislative. If you do that too much, there'll be a blowback and all of that. Then they don't want to do that. They want to make the judiciary also independent and so on. But I think that social media, the media like you as well, and every average Nigerian, everybody is a reporter now. All of our opinions is what will form how everything progresses in this economy. I'm very much for that. I think that will be fairly frugal, you know. I think we could be a little bit more frugal.
Well, I mean, the frugality is subject to debate, but let's talk about the debt and Nigeria's debt profile. You've inferred that, you know, we're doing better with our debt management. We've just repaid the debt, the IMF loan, the emergency loan that was collected in April 2020 to the tune of $3.4 billion. And yet there's a fresh request for $24 billion. So
no, there's none. The thing is that it's a 3-year plan. And the plan is just to say that's the limit, you know. So basically say that you cannot borrow anything that is not inside that plan in terms of the different categories, whether it was federal, state, local government. You can't do more than that. It doesn't mean that you're going to take all of that loan, all of the items that have been listed, number one. Number two is that, mind you, even if you get a loan from World Bank or IMF or all those kind of people, they usually don't release all the money at once. They always monitor the money. They release in bits. They monitor some more. They release in bits and so on. You know, so that is just the expenditure framework. It is not a new request to go and borrow, unfortunately, as has been presented to the public as if, oh, Tinubu wants to borrow the money. No, it's not going to happen. You know, so in fact, this year we're taking only 1.3 billion of fresh loan dollars. 1.3 billion dollars of fresh loan is the only thing we're taking this year, 2020.
And people are wondering, why are we taking loans?
And I'm talking about the foreign loans. Of course, there'll be the local one. For example, we issued a Sukuk bond of $300 billion and naira, and you know, which was oversubscribed by about 800%. We ended up getting 2.5 trillion naira.
So it's not a thing of concern if the IMF says that they are raising red flags about our, you know, borrowing our public.
I mean, and also people. I think, I don't know whether it depends on what numbers they're looking at. Given the fact that they themselves are a lender, they also do a bit of lending like this one. Why would they be raising a red flag where we just paid what most countries have not been able to do? Because these are loans taken in 2020 when COVID had locked down every economy, and by 2025 Nigeria is repaying. When some other countries are defaulting, I was looking at which country was that, and they say, you know what, Ukraine, they're in problem anyway. But Ukraine was saying that, look, they are going to default on all their loans because they just can't afford to. They have to get. Argentina has defaulted more than 9 times.
Knowing the conditionalities IMF attaches to loans, and if you look at all around Africa and the examples of people that have taken IMF loans, they never come out right. So why? Because of the conditionalities. It was because of IMF loans that we removed the subsidy on electricity, petrol, and so many other issues.
Do you know that we've taken any loan from IMF per se, apart from this COVID loan that we repaid? Nigeria is clean. We're totally clean. As if concerned, because of course IMF will give you a raft of, but whether they give you loan or not, they'll always, you know, want to advise you about how, because the IMF World Bank was set up in 1945, after the Second World War, because they felt, you know, the big leaders of the world in those days felt there's a need for us to have some global bodies that would actually check every country and ensure that one country does not drag the other one down as a result of financial mismanagement and what have you. Of course, you can criticize whether, you know, there are Rockefeller organizations or whatever it was that they are, but you know, but they will always advise us about one thing or the other. Depends on whether we want to take the advice. Yes, talking about deregulation of sectors which sort of affects us, I believe that that process itself will benefit from some of these kind of discussions that we're having. And I think that when the government needs to slow down, we know when we need to slow down. We will take it easy. And Mr. President will always push back if it's going to affect the people too adversely. I think that we should also try and just consolidate on the positives and see how some of the reforms of the government that have been taken in the last few years will deliver for the people.
Nigerians really just want the country to work. When they keep asking questions and pushing back, it's because at the end of the day, they want Nigeria to work. When it works, it benefits every one of us.
Well, everybody also has to improve on their productivity. We all have to be productive. You look at the reality. Our friends who have jackpot will tell you some of them are working in 2 different places, 3 different places. If you suggest that to a Nigerian, he doesn't want to hear that. But let everybody just face the mirror, tell themselves the truth, and be more productive for the benefit of the whole economy.
Well, the argument about whether it really is about our productivity, unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we can delve into that.
Yeah,
Dr. Tok Fasua, thank you so much for joining us, the Special Advisor to the President Economic Affairs in the Office of the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you for your time.